Okay. Mother Jones is fighting against the human cost of the Industrial Revolution. Child labor, that was very common. It still happens today, right? Out in the fields, there are children working out there. In the muck of cities, there are children working. That's illegal, though. Right? The problem with laws, though, are they being followed? But there's no laws against child labor. And in fact, working class people at this time are sending their children out. It kind of aligns with just the tradition of human activity. One of the reasons why people had large families back in the day is because, yeah, they could work out and farm once they're of age. And child mortality was very common, right? You would want to have a lot of kids. Even if you had 8 kids, there's no guarantees that those kids are going to live past 5 years old. Very common for children to die. You read, it's so crazy if you read any biography, like of a famous statesman like Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, FDR, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. There's almost entire chapters of children dying. Yeah, with huge consequences to their psychological state. But child labor, yeah, totally legal, encouraged, and with huge consequences. So it's one thing back before the Industrial Revolution, if you have your children work on a farm, it's actually probably something that was celebrated. Today we have homes, families. Think about what our homes are today. They're dormitories. I wake up, I come to work, my son goes to school, my wife goes to work, and then we briefly meet in the evening, have some dinner together, go to sleep, wake up, rinse and repeat. We have completely separate lives, and so there's a cost to that. But so like back in the day before the Industrial Revolution, families were more integrated, right? We're working together. The children would realize and appreciate the cost of things and realize that if we don't all participate in this economic activity, farming, for instance, then we don't eat, right? So, but this is different. This is more like what we have today. We wake up in a tenement apartment with no windows, no airflow, no air conditioning, obviously. We go to the factory in very dangerous conditions. And children are sought out, especially in textile factories. Textile factories, I'll show you pictures of these, but basically you had these large looms of thread that are being spun into giant textile fabrics. And the job of a textile factory mainly was to balance themselves on a ledge. And as the loom is spinning at high velocity, you're just staring at it the whole time to make sure the tension is consistent. And you have this little metal rod. And so you put your hand into the machinery to, if you see it loosening up, to pull it to reintroduce the tension. And if you're not careful, and children are not careful because their brains aren't developed, finger off, arm off, hair gets tangled in there, scalp gets ripped off. The looms, the threads are very heavy. So you have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years all day picking these things up, putting them into the whatever this thing that spins. Probably a word for that. So a lot of these kids are walking around like they're 80-year-old men. And gaunt faces, missing fingers. So she's fighting against that. And first and foremost, organizing the working class. Why do you have to organize, and what are they organizing them into? Unions. Why is that necessary to serve the interest of the working class?
The standards.
Yeah, so let's think of it practically. How many here are happy with their pay? Raise your hand high. Whoa, really? Wow, usually it's nobody. Okay, cool. So for the rest of you, you're not happy with your pay. What happens if you go, what can happen if you go to your boss going, I need a raise?
They say no.
No. And if you have somebody that's a boss that's dysfunctional, they might take that as an insult, going, oh, this is gonna be a problem. Because if she's asking for a raise, she might, if I say no, then she's gonna go out into the office and go, I've been working here for 5 years, making $17 an hour, and I just asked for $1 raise. And he just looked at me and went, no, you're dismissed. Don't you think you need a raise? Don't you think you need a raise? Well, that's trouble for someone who owns a business. So instead of just saying no, like, no, and you're fired. Well, what's the benefit of a union or a collective of workers who all need a raise? Safer working conditions, less hours.
They have collective bargaining.
Collective bargaining, exactly. So if I'm your employer, I can just say no, or you're fired. But if a guy comes in and says that here's a contract we have organized as a union, and the demands are $20 an hour, 8-hour workday, safer working conditions. What leverage does that organized pool of workers have now over the employer? What can they ultimately do if the boss just dismisses this demand?
They can go to their union and their union representative will come back and support them through negotiating that.
So, and yeah, exactly. And then if those negotiations have no audience from the employer,
Then they can strike as an entire union.
Mhm. Exactly. That's leverage. That's power. That's power. Why is that power?
Because the employers need their staff, they need their labor. And if they all are unionized, they can pull all of that and stop production.
Yeah. So this begs a question. Where does wealth come from?
Laborers.
Laborers. Laborers. This is not political, what I'm about to say. Wealth does not come from the CEOs. It doesn't come from the factory owners. It doesn't come from a specific political party. Think about a plantation back in the antebellum period where slavery exists. How is Thomas Jefferson a wealthy plantation owner? The slaves. If they're not picking the tobacco or the cotton or the rice or the indigo, he's not able to put money in his pocket. Anybody who's in business, this is not to, I mean, this is the nature of business. It's not to ride business. We need business. It's not to ride the fact that we have CEOs and all of that. But it is important to understand that what they're doing is they're organizing labor. And then they're having you work and trying to get you as productive as possible and pay you the least amount while maintaining that productivity. And so while you're producing widgets, showing up at McDonald's or Walmart or at a construction site, the employer is making money that the laborers produced. And he's putting it in his pocket and going, oh, shoot, here's your paychecks. And keeping a bulk of that wealth that was produced at the same time. That's the basis of capitalism. So the virtue of capitalism is, because has anyone here been in owned a small business? Yeah, pretty easy, huh? No, I'm just totally kidding. No, it's all consuming, right?
Yeah, my own boss, so
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's where the virtue of it is. But what happens if you get, and God forbid, cancer?
have insurance.
Cool. That's good. That's good. If you didn't have insurance, what would happen?
I prefer to die.
You would prefer to die. Yeah, exactly. That's a proper way of answering it in the United States of America. Because then you got to pay for it. Or you just get sick, the flu.
You don't get money that week that you don't work.
Yeah. Small business owners show up to work to their business all the time sick. They also don't have the luxury of clocking out and going, whew, glad that's over. They go home and they got to bring work with them. They got to think about it. They got to look at their spreadsheets. They got to make the numbers work. So anything I'm saying here isn't to go, this isn't a Marxist revolutionary class. We're down with the CEOs and the business class. And the workers rise and take over. That's what Mother Jones actually thought. Mother Jones is a socialist. Her and many people at this time, because capitalism isn't working for the working class, is saying, capitalism, how is this benefiting me? Let's get rid of it. So there's already literature out there produced in Europe and in the United States, the most famous of which is the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. That is basically saying, yeah, workers unite. Take down the capitalists. It's your money after all. It's your wealth. But that's not what I'm saying here. It's obviously because the virtue of capitalism is you get to benefit from the fruits of your labor. You take the risk. So the benefit of working for a wage is as long as that business is still around or that institution is around, you know, okay, this is how much money I'm making every year. I know how to pay my bills. I know not to go into too much debt. But when you own a business, you don't know. There's so many market forces around you. Prices go up, land properties go up, worker dynamics change. You don't know year to year if you're going to stay in business or not. It's a constant source of anxiety. So yeah, you get to choose your hours. You get to choose how it looks like. That's great. But man, my wife was a small business owner for 14 years. And it was a pretty small business, but yeah, it was a source of anxiety. If she didn't get clients, she didn't get paid. If she made a cataclysmic mistake, it was on her. She can't point her fingers at anybody. She can get sued. That kind of thing. Huge risks in owning a business. So the conversation that begins to emerge beginning like in the 1870s and 1880s through people like Mother Jones is like, okay, well, for her, capitalism is the problem. But there are other people who are involved in the labor movement who are a little bit more conservative. She's a radical. There's people like Samuel Gompers, who becomes the president of a major union that still exists today, the AFL-CIO today. He was more conservative in saying we want to create a business union rather than a radical union. A radical union is workers unite, let's get rid of capitalism. A business union is let's work with the bosses and try to leverage what we can, better wages, safer working conditions. What Mother Jones is, let's take over the factories. And we can organize collectively management. We don't have to have one manager. We could all have a committee to organize this factory. So we can all divvy up the wealth we're producing in the coal mine or the factory. That's what they're trying to do. It's a huge thing because people like John D. Rockefeller, one of the most probably famous robber barons of the time, as they're known at the time, they're these huge barons and they're robbing the working class. That's what people would call them back then. He's got much more power than any even organized union. So although unions are beginning to organize, they're considered illegal. They're not going to be actually legal and sanctioned by the federal government until we get to the 1930s under FDR and the New Deal. So if you're a John D. Rockefeller or an Andrew Carnegie or an Andrew Mellon and your workers organize and they are going on strike, how can you easily break up that strike? You've got so much money.
Hire other workers.
Yeah, hire other workers that will work even cheaper than what these union organizers are trying to demand to get them even more pay. And the United States, they've got a great tool, race. Oh, you Irish people don't want to work for 10 cents a day? There's a group of newly freed people that will happy work for 8 cents. That's leverage. That can stop the conversation right there. And if it doesn't stop the conversation, what else? With all the money in the world, John D. Rockefeller was the richest man in all of human history up until recently, Elon Musk. What could John D. Rockefeller do? Let's say the workers organized, they're on strike. And what strikers would do, workers that, okay, you got a strike, so workers that are seeking just a wage because they got families or they take care of themselves, who work anyway while there's a strike, they were called scabs. They are called scabs. And so when you see people on strike with their signs, more pay, safer working conditions, less hours, part of what they're doing when they're striking is obviously calling attention to their plight and communicating to the bosses, but they're also patrolling, making sure scabs aren't sneaking into the factory or the coal mine. And if they do, I mean, the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, it's open warfare.
Oh, wouldn't they hire their police force?
Yeah, you got the Pinkerton Boys, which was a private, detective firm that was at the service of the industrialists. So these guys would have guns on them, clubs, and they would beat the strikers. And if the boss didn't have that service, very easy just to pay, back then, a group of young men your age, $20, $30, big money back then, give them a club, give them a shotgun, and say, going after the strikers. And so no matter how effective Mother Jones is, yeah, guys with guns and money in their pocket who aren't bad people, they've got families. $20, dude. I mean, I don't know what that is the equivalent, probably several $1,000s today. And you show up tomorrow, you get another $20. So they're not bad people, but this is why Mother Jones and other socialists at this time are trying to get people to identify as class. We're all in this together. Doesn't matter if you're white, doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if you're a woman. Doesn't matter if you're employed, doesn't matter if you're not employed. We're all in this together. We're the ones producing wealth. So let's organize and see what we can do in order to benefit our lives so we can live in dignity, not live in squalor, while one individual like John D. Rockefeller lives in such opulence, such wealth, such privilege, while people are literally starving to death and breaking their bodies. So yeah, he's known for Standard Oil, which is one of the most powerful monopolies at the time. What's a monopoly?
It is where your company is controlling all of one industry.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And he's going to make an argument, we'll see later in this lecture, he's going to make an argument that monopolies are actually in service of society. Today, people make arguments like that today. But what's the counter argument? Why are monopolies not good for society? If he controls the entire oil industry. Oh, go on. Sorry, interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay. I was just saying because competition is essential for capitalism.
Yes. Yes. That's the foundation of where I was going. Competition. John D. Rockefeller isn't, in today's terms, a multi-millionaire back then because there was so much competition. He is a multi-millionaire back then because he eliminated the competition. So if there is lack of competition, why is that bad for society within any industry?
You don't have the opportunity to choose one person, one corporation.
Yeah, so what power does that give John D. Rockefeller within his industry? Yeah, specifically what? Oil now is becoming, isn't it interesting? The most wealthiest, up until recently, the most wealthiest individual is in oil. This is before oil. Oil used to actually destroy people's lands, especially here in Texas. You would have a cattle ranch here in Texas, and then oil would start bubbling up. You'd be like, damn, all I could do with this is light lanterns with. I can make a little bit of money on this, but now my grasslands are going to be destroyed. That's changing right now. What power does he have with monopolizing the entire oil industry, or nearly the entire oil industry? Yeah. If you need oil to power your factory, and then as we get in the 1920s, to power your automobile, get gasoline, he gets to set the price. Prices go up. Prices go up. We saw this. I saw this with Uber. Remember, maybe you guys probably really were little kids. Remember, hey, what is this Uber thing? Oh, it's sort of like a taxi, but different. You get on it. It used to be really, really cheap. Like $5, like go pretty far away. Round trip, plus tip. It's been a while since I've used Uber, but how much would it cost to go from here to, I don't know, one of the hospitals on 2nd Street? Yeah. And in doing so, they greatly diminish their competition, traditional taxis. And taxis work for companies, and now anybody who wants to make money transporting people is what's referred to as a gig worker, which comes with its own problems. Right? No insurance, no workman's comp, you're not contributing to Social Security. So if you're a gig worker, understand that if you do that long enough, when you grow old, you didn't contribute to Social Security, your Social Security check is going to be pretty low, maybe even non-existent. So he can set the prices wherever he wants to. What's another thing that's problematic for society?
There's no incentive for them to make their products or their company any better. If there's no competition, that's our only option.
Yeah. So I'm sure John D. Rockefeller, when he first established Standard Oil, was very concerned about having the best refineries and all of that, because he did have competition. But once he eliminated his competition, this is where these places get dangerous. The oil product becomes decreases in quality, perhaps, and this is true of any industry, but the quality goes down because people are only coming to me. It's competition where you have entire departments that are doing research and development, trying to make our product better, because if we don't, they're also doing that, and consumers will go to that company rather than ours because we got lazy and aren't producing a product that people want anymore. So that's kind of the virtue of capitalism and why we celebrate it. We have this sea of products that to choose from, and you get to make a choice. Do I want the shoes that kind of make my feet hurt? I don't make much money, but maybe I spend a little bit of money so these shoes last longer. So yeah, you can go to Payless, or where, I don't know, where you get to go shoes and get some cheap shoes, or you can say, you know what, I'm gonna really spend some money so I don't have to keep buying shoes anymore. And then there's one other thing that is really bad for society when monopolies are on the rise. And understand, oil is not the only thing. Steel is being monopolized, railroads are being monopolized. Again, how do they make their money?
They're bad for workers because they don't have options to go to another. Like now we can go to Glassdoor and be like, which is the best place for me to be a welder at? But they didn't have that. If you wanted to work in oil, this is who you worked for.
And what can John D. Rockefeller do with wages? Yeah, lower them, set them. You either work for me or you don't work at all. If you were a trained engineer at one of my refineries, you work for this much money. If there's a whole bunch of different companies that are refining oil and distributing it. You're an engineer, vital to the company. You go, I'm not working for this. There's a place right down the road that will pay me $5 more an hour with benefits. No benefits if there's a monopoly. You work for whatever they say you work. Decrease, yeah, and it's all related to, as Sophia had pointed out, competition. And the other thing that I wanted, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this lecture, very important, these people, because they have monopolies, are accumulating vast amounts of wealth, creating a emphasis on wealth distribution. Now, capitalism inherent to it, there's going to be a wealth distribution. There's going to be people who are working class that get paid less money. There's going to be managers and CEOs, bureaucrats get paid more money. But capitalism, Karl Marx would always point this out, it's not so much that the workers' revolution is what's going to take down capitalism, although that's necessary from Karl Marx's perspective or Mother Jones' perspective. It's the contradictions within capitalism. So in a wealth distribution where you have just a few people, 1%, that have 50% of the wealth within society. Why is that bad for capitalism?
Because if people don't have money, they can't spend money. And that's what capitalism is based on.
Yeah. You see why that creates profound instability? What does that lead to? If people don't get paid enough collectively across the entire country, they don't have money in their pocket to go buy shoes, watches, pants, go to restaurants, phones, cars, go on vacation. What can that lead to?
The economy crashing.
Yeah. Oh, I should put this in these PowerPoint slides. So the first industrial revolution begins in the 18 teens. And understand what's happening in the first industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution. The economy is being centralized. The political institutions are being centralized. Artisans, people that learned a trade when they were a child, they're becoming obsolete. So if you trace down, actually, yeah, I need to put this in the slide. Why I didn't think of this. But if you trace beginning in the 18 teens, what you're going to see is productivity, even wages going up, the GDP. In other words, the economy is going well, and then sometime in 1818, the economy crashes. That means businesses are going out of business, people are losing their homes, people are out of work, people are destitute. People who had money, some of them, are also destitute. Yeah.
They were also taking out like loans and credit cards at that time.
Yes, people taking out loans, that's always a problem. Especially when the economy's doing great and you're making money, you're thinking, dude, this is a great opportunity for me to open up another factory or a warehouse or another storefront. It's safe for me to get a loan. And you're just a guy in Boston who owns a shoe factory. And you're like, I'm going to take out a loan. I worked out a deal. It's 3% loan. It's going to be a big loan. Back then, let's say it's $10,000, which would be, a couple $100,000 today. And then the economy crashes. No one's now buying your shoes anymore. You're bankrupt. You've lost your business. So if you trace what you would see on a graph would look like this when it comes to the economy. Partially put this up for just a second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kennedy, if you're showing a slide or something on the board, we can't see it. Yesenia and I
Oh,
see the first slide.
it's still the first slide.
Oh,
I haven't, you see a slide, big business in the labor movement?
yes, that's what we
Yeah,
see.
yeah, I haven't changed the slide yet. I've been pontificating this whole time. And just bring that back in just a second, but yeah, so let's say, I don't know, you've got this, where would this be? Okay, this would be like 18, 18, 18, 30, 18, 40, 18, 70, 1890. So you would see this represents like the overall state of the economy. You would see things like this. It's happening every 15 or so years. And this keeps happening. We can keep going this graph. This keeps happening until we get to the 1930s. The 1930s, it's not just an economic downturn, it is a complete collapse of the economy. Collapse of the economy. So in all of these dips, you're getting anywhere from 12 to 15% unemployment, which is a crisis. For the first couple of years of the Great Depression, we're having 25%. Why is it happening? For what we just talked about. People buy stuff, companies open up, businesses open up, storefronts open up, they buy stuff. That's a really good point you brought up about people taking out loans. They get enthusiastic. Cool, the economy's roaring. I'm going to take out a loan. I'm going to start spending money. I'm going to start living the good life, man. I'm going to start buying some cool clothes, go on vacation. And meanwhile, they're not paying their workers enough. And that can sustain for a little while, but understand what begins to happen. I mean, this goes back to the European conquest of the Americas, colonialization. The economy, we talk about globalization today, well, that began in the 1600s. Why is that important to understand? Well, you're just a lowly businessman in Boston somewhere, and some major bank in London goes down that you don't even know exists. And that creates a cataclysmic effect. With other banks, they shut down. And now the added feature of workers writ large across the country not getting enough money and buying products, the economy crashes. So there's this kind of virtue in America, laissez-faire capitalism. Does anyone know what that means?
It means letting it be and letting it flow as it does without interruption or manipulation.
Yeah, manipulation or interference from what institution?
Government.
The government. And that mindset worked through colonial America, the early republic, somewhat through the antebellum, although there were problems. The antebellum is the 1820s, 1860s. But beginning in the time period we're studying, which is the 1860s to the early 20th century, the conversation is beginning to rise of, we need government intervention here to play referee, not just for the workers, but also for the business community. And it's a sort of conundrum because if you're in business, you're thinking of your own personal profits. You're in this frenzied game of competition. And you could be a decent person, go to church, right? Love your family. You're not like twisting your mustache every night going, ha, 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 I have money. How will I destroy the lives of my workers, right? I actually don't, there were probably some people like that, just sadistic weirdos. But for the most part, I mean, if you met John D. Rockefeller, decent guy. In fact, he did decent things. He opened up libraries and hospitals. He's a philanthropist. But he's caught in a system. If he starts saying, if you're whether you're talking about someone like a giant like John D. Rockefeller, but let's say you own a little textile factory somewhere in New York City. If you're like, you know what, man, yeah, I was in church, man, and they were talking about Jesus, and Jesus was saying how we should be decent to our brothers and sisters. And I'm looking at my workers, and they look like they're getting skinnier every day, and their hair's falling out because they don't have enough food. And I actually walked by where they're living. Gosh, it stunk even before I got to the apartment. I need to pay them more. And I was looking at my building, and man, it's a 4-story building. That's pretty dangerous. What if a fire happened? They should have a fire escape. And so you're a decent person, and you say, I'm going to start paying my workers more. I'm going to spend some money for a fire escape. Why would that be, if the government isn't involved, why would that be such a stupid business decision?
There will be no benefit for it.
Well, there could be a benefit. I'm sure the workers would become far more productive. I mean, that's just almost natural. I got paid more. I'm actually happy to go to work. Like my boss, he's a cool dude. So he might see some short-term gains in profits. You see this with Costco. Costco compared to Walmart workers. People make careers out of Costco. Now, the owners of Costco, they're not cynical, but what they don't want to have happen is a union form. So they're taking the initiative. We're going to pay you a decent wage that you can perhaps live on, get you benefits, vacation, so you don't form. People are like, cool, union schmunion. Right? I'm happy to work here. And Costco's profits have always been up, even in downturns of the economy. But if we're talking about this time period, for the Progressive Era, when the Progressive Era is between 1901 and 1917, we'll study that later on, probably next week. And then the New Deal, the 1930s. Before this time period, there's no minimum wage. There are no safety standards. No fire escapes. So if you were a decent employer going, you know what, I got to do the right thing here, man. I'm going to pay my workers more. We're going to have fire escape or whatever working conditions, ventilation in the coal mines. They'll be able to work in pairs in the coal mines, because sometimes coal miners will be like, you work alone because I don't want to pay another person to watch your back in case they start seeing dust fall, which might be an indication of a collapse. Why would that be a stupid decision for a business owner before government intervention saying, you've got to provide a fire escape. You've got to have 2 people in the coal mines working together.
Because that costs
What's that?
because it costs more money to do those things.
It costs more money, but again, that could lead to better productivity because workers are happy and they become more productive. But without government intervention, government mandate creating laws saying minimum wage, safety standards, and all of that, why would that be a dumb decision for a single business owner to initiate?
Is that if you're expecting, sorry.
No, yeah, same thing.
What?
Like, others would expect them.
Okay, others, I can create expectations. Hey, that guy down the road, that's not the major concern here, because other people will be like, well, then go work for him. I'm making money, by exploiting him. What if your competition found out you're paying your workers more and you spend a whole bunch of money with fire escapes or ventilation? If your competition finds out, they could do something very clever. They could lower their prices temporarily while you're spending all this money trying to be a decent business owner. And now consumers were like, dude, did you see at that store? You can buy shoes much cheaper, whatever the product is. We're going there. And then meanwhile, this guy who's trying to be a decent person, paying his workers more, trying to provide safer working conditions, where'd my customers go?
So they'll lose business.
Yeah, you'll go out of business. And then your competition goes, hey, it's like you're having some hard times. Golly gee, wonder how that happened. Listen, man, I'll do you a solid. How about we get our lawyers together and I buy your business? So what begins to emerge, not just for workers and consumers, do we need government intervention, but business also needs government intervention, because even though you might hear people in the business community today who are just, working really hard, trying to make money, provide for their families, they will say, I want the government off my backs. What they don't realize is that the government provides a sustainable marketplace to make sure consumers have money in their pocket, that they don't break their backs at the factory, that they are actually happy to go to work and be more productive. So money is referred to as currency, like a current. It flows. And sometimes it's necessary to put up a dam. But what happens to the water that was flowing into that dam? It becomes stagnant. It becomes not life-sustaining. Fish, animals will die that depended on that flowing water. So if you think about currency, money that flows from community to community, from individual to individual. So if you're getting paid a decent wage, you're able to pay your bills. You gotta do that. Over. I'm going to this restaurant, taking my lady out, my kids out, or whatever. Well, now that restaurant owner is going, cool, I got money. And that restaurant owner lives in this community. Now he's got money. He's going to go over to the grocery store that's owned locally, perhaps. Spend money there. Or go to a yoga studio. Packers. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of the Triangle Shirt Factory fire where they had locked up the exits so that the workers wouldn't take breaks. So then when the fire started, like a lot of the women died there. It was really sad.
It's incredibly sad. And that is an eye-opener for society, because it was not just horrifying to these women. Most of those women weren't burnt to death or choking on the smoke, although some did. But they're jumping out of the building and plop, plop, plop. And there's people, this is I think it's in New York City. Yeah, New York City. And people are like, what the hell's going on? There's a fire, and about 60 women are just jumping to their deaths. And yeah, they had gone on strike earlier, not for higher wages, but for a fire escape, which was, they didn't have, nobody had a fire escape. And they were locked in because these silly workers were doing things like going to the bathroom in the middle of their shift. That takes money out of my pocket, yo. But again, although they were probably very malicious business owners back then, they're caught in a system where they need to maximize profits. Because owning a business, especially a small business, you can go under real quick. So you gotta always be one step ahead of the game of your competition. But I want to bring this up to really emphasize, because what we're seeing here happening in the 1880s, 1890s, through the early 20th century is going to lead to not just a downturn in the economy in the 1930s, it's going to lead to a collapse in the economy, the Great Depression. And there's several factors for the Great Depression that we'll go over in detail, but the main factor is maldistribution of wealth. People getting paid as an aggregate across the country, not enough money, not just to buy things, that's pertinent to our conversation here, but even to take care of themselves. But since they didn't have enough money to purchase other things, they're going into debt. In the 1920s, we see the beginning of the layaway system, early credit system. which is fine, run a credit card bill. You need, new shoes or something like that, but man, you better make sure that your job is sustainable because it ain't no fun to have a credit card bill and also have no job. And that's what happens during the Great Depression. People didn't have high wages or sufficient wages, and they were heavily in debt. The economy crashes, and what you'll see during the Great Depression is just bands of men walking from city to city. And this is a problem because now you have destitute men who are desperate coming into your community and there are no jobs. So there would be big banners, big billboards. There are no jobs here. Keep walking. So it's not like, this happens today, but like my wife is currently out of work and she's got some good prospects. She's already had a couple of interviews and for some pretty decent jobs out there. So it sucks being out of work today, but yeah, you figure it's a whole different game too, trying to find a job today. But she's figured it out. It's what she spends her whole day doing, talking to ChatGPT, getting a resume, all this like that. But it looks like she'll probably have a job within the next few weeks. It's not happening in the 1930s. Men are leading their families and traveling hundreds of miles, getting on railroads, walking. There's no jobs. 25% unemployment, that would be 1 in 4 people without a job. Understand, once you have 25% unemployment, now what power do employers have for the 75% as far as their wages? You want a job? There's thousands of people lined up at the door. You work for what I say. So wages in the 1930s are plummeting. They were already not sufficient. So the economy's collapsed. And it has everything to do with what's going on today. This is a fascinating article that I love to share. It helped me understand the problem that we're facing today. So this article was written during COVID. Remember COVID? Way back then? No, just a few years ago. A lot of people got laid off. Businesses were shut down by government authority because we were trying to contain a novel virus. And the danger of a novel virus is the same thing that Native Americans faced. So we didn't know anything about this. And so what that means is that nobody had a genetic disposition to protect themselves. So a virus happens, there's some people are going to get sick, there's some people, for whatever reason, it's been introduced in their lineage, that you can cough right on that person and they ain't getting sick because they've got antibodies already embedded in their DNA. That's not true of a novel virus. So even though an argument can be made that certain local and state governments probably went a little bit overboard, closing the schools down, not really understanding the implications of how that could affect just people's psychology, it came from good intentions, because what happens if everybody's dying? And understand, like when I refer to Native Americans, 90% of Native Americans in the 1600s, 90% died of smallpox and measles and the flu. 90%. COVID shut down our society for a little while, and we had a 2% mortality. So, and maybe they went overboard, but again, government officials are operating like this could be bad. And it could have been much worse if a vaccine wasn't developed. As soon as you get the vaccine, you can still get COVID, but I got COVID before the vaccine. Like anybody who got COVID, it knocked me on my ass. And I've got COVID after the vaccine, and it's like a really shitty cold, right? Because now I have antibodies in my body. They see the COVID virus and they attack it, and it makes me sick a little bit, but I'm not going to be end up in a hospital intubated with a tube down my throat, and the doctor's going, I don't know if he's going to live or not. That's what was happening to millions of Americans and people all over the world. So this was released during COVID, and so people are getting laid off. Businesses are shut down. And that made a lot of Americans bankrupt. And so the writers of this article are referencing a RAND study. RAND is basically a think tank that services major corporations in this country and around the world. They study trends, economic trends. They pass that information of you need to be aware of what's going on here, so you can maximize profits. So understand the information they're getting. This isn't from someone like Mother Jones who's going, the rich are bad. This is coming from a business perspective. And so the title of this article is The Top 1% of Americans Have Taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90%. The top 1% of Americans have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90%, and that's made the US less secure. Why? Well, let's say, and I'll give you some details of this article in a second, because the headline's making an argument that the top 1%, the Elon Musks, right, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Jeff Bezos, people you see on the news that fly these rockets up to space and come down going, isn't it cool being who we are? They're making an argument that they have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of y'all. So what the argument of this article is, if that didn't happen, if there was a healthy wealth distribution, not that there wouldn't be any Elon Musks or Jeff Bezos, there's people making money based on the very hard work they're doing and organizing their corporations, but they weren't making 300, 500, 600 times more than the median wage earner within the corporation, not the bottom. I'm talking the bureaucrat within their corporation making 200 at least times more. Then, okay, because it's very conceivable that we get another novel virus that we have to rinse and repeat and go through that nonsense that we went through again. If that happens and people had this 50, not million, not billion, trillion that could have been distributed to you, you in the camera, anyone who's watching this, all of us. Then, okay, yeah, I got laid off. The government says I can't have customers come to my business. I'm a priest or a pastor in a church, and nobody can come to this church anymore. A lot of churches shut down permanently. Businesses shut down permanently. Permanently. That equates to destroyed lives. Destroyed lives. If people had that money in their pocket, then yeah, this sucks, but I got a savings account. I could weather this storm for 3-6 months or whatever the case is. So what is this article? This is such a fascinating article. This is not some back to the napkin approximation. According to the groundbreaking new working paper by Carter C. Price and Catherine Edwards of the RAND Corporation, so these are not hippies. These are people who are very interested in corporate profits, has the more equitable income distribution of the 3 decades following World War II, 1945 to 1974, merely held steady. So income distribution between 1945 and 1974, it had held steady. So as productivity was going up, what they're saying here is wages were going up and keeping up with productivity. That changes after 1974. Productivity has gone up since the early 1970s, and wages have continued to stagnate. That's a choice. That's a boss, a CEO going, pay our workers less, pay our workers less, year after year. Merely held steady. The aggregate annual income of Americans earning below the 90th percentile would have been $2.5 trillion higher in the year 2018 alone This is the amount of equal to nearly 12% of the GDP. This is the kicker. Pay attention. Enough to more than double the median income. Enough to pay every single not families, every single working American in the bottom. So wages that some of you all might be working at McDonald's, Walmart. In the bottom 9 deciles, an additional $1,144 a month. Every month. Every single year. What's being said here? This is the time to pay attention. This is not just some dust we are scraping off a history textbook. What's happening in the 1880s, what happened in the 1930s is happening now. What are they saying here?
So like the pay has remained the same. And if we were getting paid what we're supposed to, it would be up to 1,144 extra that we would have.
For low wage earners. We're not talking about people who are engineers or bureaucrats, people who are making 60, 80, 90, 100, $200,000 a year. For people, for wages that you guys might be working for today in this classroom, you would have every month, if wages had kept up with productivity from the early 1970s, today, you would have $1,144 a month in your pocket. What could you do with $1,144 extra on top of what you're getting paid every month?
You could pay for healthcare. You could pay for childcare. You could pay for a safe and more equitable zip code to live in so your kids have a better education.
Property, invest.
Yeah, buy a home. That's enough to. My mortgage here in the valley is $1,200. That would mean people working minimum wage, perhaps, or a little bit more, could perhaps save some of that money and buy a home.
You could go back to college. You could pay tuition with that.
You could pay tuition with that. And what this this is during COVID, and what the argument they're making is we wouldn't have had such a disruption to our society if people were making money that was keeping up with productivity of the major corporations that we all are employed for, or at least connected to. So you could have so a good idea, no matter how much of your money you're making, you got to figure out whatever it is, $25 a month, $200 a month. It is very wise to go, okay, that goes in the savings account. You got to figure out what that dollar amount is. You have to do that, because if you don't, you run over a nail and now you got to buy a new tire. Credit card, now you're in debt. Right? So this is what we do in our family. We put away anywhere from, and it's not a lot, 100 to, depending on how much we're getting paid, maybe $200 a month, no matter what, tax ourselves, we put it in the savings account. So that way, if the dog needs to go to the vet, right, insurance doesn't cover something, we're not bringing out the credit card. If this was possible, this would be a possibility for all Americans. Now, this is a conversation not just to rally the working class and to get people pissed off. This would probably, for the business class who are a little bit shy about government intervention, this would lessen the burden for government to say, oh, we need to provide a safety net. Your corporation needs to pay taxes. You need to do, people would be able to take care of themselves. So for example, in the Netherlands, they have very low union organization here because they don't need it. Because people get paid a decent wage there. And they have a robust safety net. So if you are in business, you don't have to necessarily worry about in those countries one more added feature of a union, in addition to all the other things that come when you're running a business. It is, if I owned a business, that would be a major pain in the butt to deal with a union, in addition to profits and costs and all of that.
Well, also when you look at areas like the Netherlands, and I bring this up only because your prompt for the internet students is that we look through this through a lens of capitalism and the patriarchy, and you cannot you cannot separate the patriarchy from the fall of the current economy. If we supported women and children the way they did in the Netherlands, then the government would mandate that there would be postpartum coverage and that you could take an extended maternity leave and workers could actually take care of their children and return back and have adequate childcare to be productive in the economy. And women would be centered because when you take care of women, women take care of our community. And we don't do that here. So we don't have the bandwidth to take care of other people around us because we're drowning.
Preach it, sister.
Thank you.
Amen. You notice how we're on each other's throats? There used to be a time where you can sit down at Thanksgiving and talk politics. If you're a malicious type person, just do that today. Bring up politics. Ruin Thanksgiving. Go ahead, see what happens. All right, no. Yeah, you got this weird uncle showing up in a red hat. You're just like, pass the gravy. I ain't bringing up anything here. Even if you kind of agree with this politics, you like, dude, we haven't seen each other for months. Let's hang out and play some games and eat food and get our stomach stuff, right? No, it used to be, when I was your age, we talked, oh, you think we should have more tax breaks for the rich? I don't think that. Cool. You want to go shoot some hoops? We're at each other's throats. Politically, racially, economically. Added features of you got to worry about people who are trans and gay and the immigrants. Where does that come from? Exactly where Sophia, who was just talking to us, is talking about. Not taking care, not valuing, whether you're talking about women or men, valuing the economic contributions of someone who says, I'll take care of the children, you go to work. Right? In some European countries, those people get paid by the government because they decided for themselves it's valuable for our economy and the overall state of happiness. So we have a cohesive society that we're not killing each other, that we're not at each other's throats. That if you have a different opinion about politics or your way of life, I find that an existential threat. And I don't even want to talk to you. I have a brother, I won't go into details, but it's over politics. And it's been about 9 years from anyone's heard from him because our family has a culture of a certain politics. He disagrees. He thinks we are immoral. I'm not unique. That's happening all over this country. Why? Because we're worried about all sorts of strange issues that, so let's just take, for example, trans people. Even if you find that abhorrent, how is that affecting you? So if you look at a guy who wants to be a woman, you might look at them and go, that's strange. I don't agree with that. Okay, cool. But there's a whole political movement that's saying, pay attention to that. Pay attention to immigrants that are coming over our borders. And there might be issues with that we could collectively have a rational conversation. But writ large, immigrants coming to this country commit far less crimes than people born here and contribute to the economy. Why are we so focused on the immigrants? The subtext of this is because the top 1% is going, let me see what's in your pocket. Let me see what's in your pocket. Ooh, there's somebody there. Ooh.
And the reason that we're all so concerned with those things is because there's a monopoly on the news outlets.
Yes.
So they can get us riled up from the left and the right so that we're not collective in the middle class or the low class. And if they can keep us all distracted and confused and angry, we cannot have collective bargaining.
Yeah. The argument Mother Jones is making at this time period is there's no left or right. It's up and down. Look up. They're the ones. John D. Rockefeller's taking money away from you. John D. Rockefeller's making you risk your life in these factories. Look up. Don't look that way. Don't look that way. We're all in the same situation here. No matter if you're actually I make a decent living. I lose my job. I risk, my family is at risk of being homeless within a couple of months. Or at best, having to scale down greatly. Meaning sell a home, move to a 2-bedroom apartment. We're all in this. This is the argument that's beginning to be made when the economy is being centralized. And because prior to the Industrial Revolution, people were far more autonomous. You had control, a lot more control when you produced products that people in your community came and bought from you. And that money circulated within your little town, township, community, whatever. And people were happy. Some people fell on their face, but others survived. Now the Industrial Revolution is happening. People are working in factories that are less productive. I mean, far more productive, but less wages. They're dangerous. People have less money. This is a trend that has been happening for 5 generations now. My apologies. Let's take a break. Take about a 5-minute break, get some coffee, get some tea. Stretch, ingest what we're talking about here. Very interesting what we're talking about here. And let me know if you have any questions. While we're on a break, let's listen to a little song dedicated to Mother Jones by a guy named Utah Phillips.
Boy, when I was invited to stop and sing at a memorial there in the little town of Mount Olive. Now, who of note in American history is buried in the cemetery in Mount Olive, Illinois? I'll give you a hint. It was a woman. It was the Union Miners Cemetery. Do you have it yet? Mary Harris Jones, Mother Jones. It's hard for the mind to encompass a life that embraced the presidencies between Andrew Jackson and Herbert Hoover. Why, when Mother Jones was a little girl, there were people still alive who remembered the Revolutionary War. And she died on the eve of the New Deal. Her millinery shop burned down in the Chicago fire, and she had heard Abraham Lincoln speak in person. Mostly, though, Mother Jones was the miner's friend. Down in Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, well, the men would be organizing the underground workers, the miners. Mother Jones had already organized their wives and led them over the snow-covered game trails down into the hollows, where, armed with mops and brooms, they drove the scabs out of the coal pits. Now, Mother Jones wasn't an organizer, she was an agitator, which meant often enough she was hated as much by the organizers as by the bosses. One time, Mother Jones was out in Colorado at the great Ludlow strike. Now, that was a strike to enforce the 8-hour day, which the state of Colorado had made a law, but they couldn't enforce it because Rockefeller owned the militia. Now, the governor had promised not to send the militia into the coal fields, but he lied, and he did. Mother Jones was in the Union Hall down there at Ludlow, and word came that the militia had entered the coal fields. Well, she leapt up and she screamed, "Let's go get the sons of bitches!" And she stormed out. She didn't look to see if anybody was following her. Nobody was following her. She just flounced up the road alone and confronted the militia. And that was the year that President Theodore Roosevelt called Mother Jones the most dangerous woman in America. And she was 83 years old. That's some kind of dangerous.
Most dangerous woman, 83 years old, the most dangerous woman. Mother Jones, the most dangerous woman. 83 years old, the most dangerous woman. Mother Jones, the most dangerous woman. 83 years old, the most dangerous woman. Mother Jones, Mother Jones, Mother Jones, Mother Jones, Mother Jones, the most
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back into the font is a little bit, gonna change the color on that, but yeah, put the cell phones away and all of that. Let's merge ourselves back into our ancestor, Mother Jones. She's here with us. Theodore Roosevelt, who was actually a decent president, he actually, one of the reasons why the progressive era is set in 1901, that's when he becomes president. We don't want to be under the delusion it was because of him, but he was the first president that went, we should probably consider the needs of the working class and consumers, rather than what traditionally was happening in the industrial era, and even prior to that, just the interest of capital, people in the business community. But even him, he referred to Mother Jones as the most dangerous woman alive. Take a look at that woman. Well, let me go to this picture. You look dangerous to you? Are you going to walk across the street if she's coming down on the sidewalk? Oh, shoot. There's a. Why would a president of the United States, who kind of writ large does represent the interest of capital, historically, from George Washington all the way to our current president, refer to her as the most dangerous woman alive?
Because she was a threat to the status quo.
Yeah. And the status quo is what we've been talking about, maldistribution of wealth. people in power. You refer to Sophia the patriarchy. One, let's make sure we understand what that word means. It's not let's wag our finger at men. In fact, examining the patriarchy is in benefit of men. The patriarchy literally means men rule. And what happens when you live in a society where one group of people rule is you have a maldistribution of power, not considering the needs of women, children, workers. It's a sense of entitlement. I'm a man. So since I'm a man, and there are some women in this class, for the remainder of this class, women, please keep your mouths closed. That kind of weird, crazy attitude, right? If I were to actually say that and be sincere, I would hope red flags would go up. Right? That's the attitude, though. If you're born into that, you're raised to believe that, and you get married, and your wife is like, hey, I don't think we should spend our money like this. You're going to the tavern too much. We need to buy bread. We need to pay rent. And you're always with the boys, gambling, drinking. If you were raised to believe that I am the head of the household and you must submit to me, then you're just annoying. Rather than just bringing up a legitimate concern. Perhaps she's wrong. I'm not spending that much money. I just hang out with the boys. I realize that, honey. Yeah, I would not buy beer when we can't make rent. But I just like the boys. I just hang out with them and they buy me some beer. Have a conversation. Or like, okay, you're right, honey. Yeah, I get that. Until we get more money, I'll stop hanging out with the boys. Well, that's an individual, but writ large, yeah, if you are a John D. Rockefeller or a Teddy Roosevelt, and you have especially a woman who's pointing out not just flaws in society, systematic flaws. That's what we're talking about in the bulk of this course. So if you ever have the kind of idea that, hey, man, it sounds like this guy's bashing America. No. We're looking at the systematic problems of the United States that cause real harm to most people who have to live here based on the system, capitalism, the patriarchy. And so if only men can vote, only men can operate huge corporations, only men can be in the professional trades, you're not getting the lived experience of people that can actually contribute to those big, huge institutions that we're talking about. Who could bring up something like Sophia brought up? She brought up postpartum depression. If I'm a man who has never had children, or I have had children, but I discount the needs of my wife, and somebody brings that up at some sort of Congress committee meeting, it's like, oh gosh, here we go. Women issues. Postpartum depression is a very real thing that has an effect on our society. If you're a woman whose husband is not sensitive to postpartum depression, when you get through that, now you go to the workplace. If we just think in terms of the economy, and now you kind of realize that, okay, I'm with a guy that really doesn't see me. And now you're at work. And you're still depressed because, yeah, I live in a situation where I thought this guy, before we had kids, saw me. Mainly because I was a sexual object. But now that we have a kid, and I went through this thing called postpartum depression, he was with the boys, or he was just like looking at me saying, hey, you need to grow up, gotta take care of your baby. Then you go to work, and then you're not going to be happy being there because you're not happy at all. Productivity goes down. That's just the economics of it. It's going to have an effect. And it will also have an effect on the way you raise your children. You're going to be resentful, and you have these children that you raise. Despite the best intentions of being a mother, I'm not being seen by my husband. Your child spills some milk and you just lose your shit. And then that kid grows up And he was constantly being yelled at mom because dad wasn't seeing her. And he doesn't understand because he's never been in a romantic marriage, sexual relationship. And he just sort of thinks that, well, women, they just sort of get emotional every once in a while. So there's that trope. Women are just emotional, which you can look down on that, but I do that as a superpower. To be aware of your emotional state. If you're aware of your emotional state when you're, because what's the emotional state most men can be aware of? Anger. Nothing wrong with being angry. Sometimes people do us harm, but it is possible to have a rational conversation when you're angry. Hey, do you got 5 minutes? No? Okay, tonight, can we talk? Because when we were out to dinner with our friends, and you brought up that thing from our past, that made me angry. And I felt not seen and I was hurt. Rather than going, if you ever say that again in front of our friends, I will. You get angry. But yeah, women have a superpower of being emotional. I was humiliated. I feel really sad. I feel uncertain about the future. They cry. Generally speaking. What happens when a man cries? Your father.
He's shamed.
Yeah. And it kind of weirds everybody out. Think about your dad. If your dad comes home and he just starts sobbing because he had a hard day at work. You see a mom do that, it's like, oh, mom, it's okay if you're a loving person. Can I get you some coffee? Dad does that, it's like, give him a space. He's crying. I don't know what's going on. And if you don't have that outlet of just being around people you love and trust and be like, I'm sad. I don't know what to do. That's when we talk about the patriarchy, especially if you're a young man in this classroom, don't think, hey, you guys better shape up. Right? It has nothing. It obviously hurts women and children, especially in the far spectrum of it when we talk about abuse. But it also hurts men. Because yes, the only emotional state a man is able to express is anger. Typically when that happens, they yell, they scream, they punch walls, sometimes people. And who does that besides a man? What other types of human beings do that in a certain stage of their life? Little kids do that. Perfectly, one should expect that from a little kid. They're throwing a temper tantrum, and a healthy parent will sit down with them, but maybe they're pissed off because they didn't get a cookie. And you affirm their emotions, and you say, I see you're mad because you didn't get a cookie. Guess what? I get mad when I don't get a cookie too. How do you feel? Rather than, an unhealthy parent is be like, because I said you don't get a cookie. You got to eat your dinner first. But yeah, so especially if you were raised as a boy and every time you shared your emotional experience, you were chastised, anger was thrown back at you. And then with all the inputs of society and history, you grow up and you're closed off. And then you meet a beautiful woman and you might have a couple of years of some passion and love. But then, yeah, you shack up and then real life issues. And she comes to you and says, there's things in this house that are going on that we need to talk about. And so it's threatening to you and you feel angry instead of saying, hey, I get that you're upset about these things. Here's where I'm coming from. You just get angry at her. And then now you live in a dysfunctional home. So it's bad for everybody, the patriarchy. And so that's the individual family base. It's bad for society. You have people who discount other people's needs, class needs. Well, guess what's going to happen eventually? The economy is going to collapse because men with power who were raised to believe that what I say goes, and I don't want to hear any counter argument or perspective. Well, the economy that person, like a John D. Rockefeller, is thriving on is going to collapse. And where is he then after that? He might actually have to face a society that embarks in revolution, which nearly happened during the 1930s. We were very close in the 1930s of either having a communist revolution or a fascist revolution. And definitely a communist revolution is bad for business, real bad for business. Fascist revolutions, not so much. Those are definitely a patriarchal system. So yeah, she's considered the most dangerous woman alive by a sitting president of the United States because she represents a threat, not just to flaws in society, but she's pointing out to the system. The system is flawed. It creates a maldistribution of wealth. It creates dangerous conditions for workers. And we need to change that. Now, her solution is probably a solution that, this is why Theodore Roosevelt is really thinking she's dangerous. She's thinking the government needs to take over all of industry. Workers need to have co-ops. And we need to take the profit motive out for business and share that profit motive distributedly for the workers. That is one way. The Russia tried that. And speaking of patriarchy, probably why it didn't work there is men did that, and what happened in the Soviet Union was it was basically a hierarchy of the workers or the proletariat, where they created an elite class that was at the expense of Russian citizens, and it really didn't work out too well. It's hard to, communism, we don't need the details, but communism is a very difficult thing. On paper, you think, especially when you're young, you can look at communism and go, yeah, this sounds great. But to put it writ large to an entire nation, it's difficult. There is what we see in the 1930s. What's great about the New Deal, or I won't say great, but what is beneficial about the New Deal is FDR's leadership and the thousands of people that were working towards recovering the economy were going, capitalism is good, has good things. One should be able to benefit from the fruits of their labor, but there are societal needs. So let's put those things two together. Let's take the virtues of capitalism, let's take the virtues of socialism, put them together. So old people who live honest, hard lives, did everything they were told, aren't out in the streets digging their next meal out of a garbage can. Okay, let's create Social Security. So when you're old, you at least have some income coming in if you fell short on property investments and some sort of pension. So here are some quotes of Mother Jones that I think are illustrative, that give you a sense of who she might have been and pointing to the system. I asked a man in prison once how he had happened to be there. Oh, this is, she's looking at a guy who's in prison, right? Once who had happened to be there, and he said he had stolen a pair of shoes. I had told him if he had stolen a railroad, he would be a United States Senator. That's happening today. People who have committed fraud are being pardoned today, who stole money from people who are working hard. There are some decent, I don't want to create an environment where we look at politicians and go, they're all the same. But there are definitely criminals in the Congress who steal and aggrandize themselves and make themselves wealthy. The fact that Congress members, both the House and the Senate, are able to trade stocks, that's a problem. That's a systematic problem because they're the ones creating the laws that affect industry. They have inside information. They make $200,000 a year, and most of them weren't multimillionaires when they went in. Some of them were, but they walk out multimillionaires, and it's not due to their salary. It's due to trading stocks. They have inside information. That's that. Because they're creating laws that affect you, and they're putting the money in their pocket. They're getting rid of regulations that keep our air and our water safe. They're creating laws that have an effect on your wages, and they're lowering. And then they're making millions of dollars because they can manipulate the market by creating, they can go, oh, cool, this is going to affect the auto industry. I'm buying lots of stocks before people find out about it. I buy cheap, and then people find out about this new law that's going to affect the industry. They start buying, and then they sell their stocks, and they put that money in the pocket. That's kind of the corruption that she's talking about there. That's just an example of what's going on today. No matter what the fight, don't be ladylike. So she's talking here. This quote, she's talking to a group of suffragists. So during the progressive era and prior to the progressive era, women's suffrage is on the table, and there's people who dedicate their lives to make sure women have the guaranteed right to vote, no matter what state they live in, at the federal level. This is so interesting what she says here. God Almighty made women, and the Rockefeller gang of thieves made the ladies. This is what's so, if you read her autobiography, that's what you guys are reading. She's really adept at rhetoric and language. What she's saying there is there's a lot to unpack there. No matter what the fight, so she's looking at suffragists, and she doesn't agree with suffrage. You don't need the vote to raise hell. Not because she's misogynistic and hates women. She would be for the vote if we got rid of capitalism. She doesn't want more voters voting for the system of capitalism. That's her issue. That's her opinion. You could disagree with that, but that's where she's coming from. But she's looking at these suffragists going, hey, whatever your fight is, don't be ladylike. God Almighty made women, you all, she's talking to suffragists, Rockefeller, the gang of thieves. I mean, this is how strident she was. Made the ladies. What she's talking about there is a system, the patriarchy. This is how you dress, ladies. This is how you act in public. This is what you buy. Don't smoke cigarettes in public. That's what men do. Don't vote. That's what men do. So it's sort of a construction of what a lady is, rather than just being an individual who happens to be a woman. So I've used this word. This is essentializing a group of people. So I'm looking around. There's some women here. I can make some immediate assumptions about you as women. But if I make assumptions about you, I'm in danger of not knowing you. Because, yeah, you happen to be women. I can make some assumptions. I can behave accordingly. I act differently with other men. That's just normal. We all act differently around different types of people. But in doing so, I run the danger of not approaching you, the ladies watching from the internet, as individuals. Because there's a spectrum, right? I was referring to the trans movement. What that tells us is there's a spectrum when it comes to gender. And we all know these, we've all met these people. This might be applied to some people in this classroom. You're a woman, or you're a man, a boy, or a girl. And you can make some generalities of boys and girls. It seems like boys like to play with fire trucks, girls like to dress up, and that seems to be something inherent in their species. But there are some girls who are like, Barbie, give me the fire truck, give me the ball. They have masculine qualities within them. And then there's some young boys that are, I want to look pretty. Put a dress on me, right? So we have traditionally had two genders, man, woman. Behave accordingly. We actually have always had more than two genders. And gender is a social contract. You don't have to use the word. The word is offensive. Can be offensive, though. You see a young boy who picks up a baseball and throws it like that. He goes, oh, what word might be attributed to that young boy?
Girly.
Girly.
Like, girl is a bad thing, first of all. And yes, they would try to shame him by calling him girl.
That's genderizing him. So I won't say the word because it's offensive, but the F word, you know what I mean by that? That's saying that you're not a boy. You're this. And that's bad. You're girly. There's something wrong with girls. Especially if you're a boy. Act like a boy. Act like a man. Right? That's what she's talking about here. Who creates these boxes? Is anyone into Alice in Chains? showing my page here.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, they're a great band. Look them up, grunge and all that. But their number one song is Man in a Box, and that's all about what I'm talking about here. I'm a man in a box buried in my shit. Someone who has been raised, who has been put in a box to say that when I'm having an emotional state, whether even happy, joyous, sad, humiliated, stay in your box, man. Because it is a strange thing. But man, I tell you, I look up to men who are able to come to me and going, man, I'm feeling really sad right now. That's a superpower. And that's what she's saying here. Who creates these boxes? Well, people with power create these boxes. This is how you behave. Don't step out of the box. They began work at 5:30 and quit at 7 at night. She's referring to children working in textile factories. Children 6 years old going home to lie on a straw pallet until time to resume work the next morning. Blink, wake up, go to work. I worked this kind of shifts out in the fishing industry when I was in my 20s. It's a weird state. You literally blink, you wake up, work 60 hours, blink, wake up, go back to work. I have seen the hair torn out of their heads by the machinery, their scalps torn off, and yet not a single tear was shed. While the poodle dogs were loved and caressed and carried to the seashore. This is a class distinction she's making. She's saying this is happening in the factories. Kids are getting their scalps taken off because their hair gets caught up in machinery. And there's this class of people, the middle class, upper middle class, the wealthy, who have these designer dogs in the best clothes, wearing textiles because the children made it, and living the good life. And they don't realize they've got blood all over. That's what she's pointing out here. This is probably my favorite quote from Mother Jones's autobiography. Sorry, oh, geez. Gotta change the font. The color. But what does it say here? So she's an organizer, and she has been organizing, and yeah, she's the most dangerous woman alive. Politicians, people in industry don't want her showing up at some coal mining town or a factory, because when she does, she's very effective at organizing workers. So the governor finds out. She's on her way to Colorado. And so this is from her autobiography. So she's, let me give you some more background. She's on the train, and the conductor gets orders from the governor. She's freedom of assembly. She's going where she wants to go as an American, taken off the train and put on her butt. And so another conductor finds out, who's very sympathetic, he knows who Mother Jones is, and puts her back on another train, and she goes straight to Colorado to organize workers. So she's pissed off. So she writes a letter to the governor of Colorado at the time. Mr. Governor, you notified your dogs of war to put me out of the state. They complied with your instructions. I hold in my hand a letter that was handed to me by one of them, which says, under no circumstance return to this state. It's a governor of a state telling another U.S. citizen, we don't have checkpoints on states. We have freedom of travel. For whatever reason, as long as you're not being a criminal, you can go from Texas to Oklahoma, to Louisiana. If Governor Abbott, for whatever reason, said, never come back to this state, I don't want you in this state, that's a problem. So she has a response. I wish to notify you, Governor, that you don't own the state, that it was admitted to the Sisterhood of States. My fathers gave me a share of stock in it, and that is all they gave to you. Yeah, you are a governor. You happen to be governor. We should respect the authority of that position, but you are overstepping the bounds of that authority by putting me out of the state, is what she's saying. And this is where it gets good. I am right here in the Capitol. After being out 9 or 10 hours, 4 or 5 blocks from your office. I want to ask you, Governor, what in the hell are you going to do about it? Put it in an envelope, sent it to the governor. That's the type of person she was. Person of tremendous dignity, who respected people, but when you disrespected her, you'll let me know. Let's conclude with social Darwinism. Just this will be a segue because we'll talk about this on Monday. Tomorrow, we might talk about this tomorrow, just depending on your preparation. Again, you're busy, you don't have time to go through all those questions. No big deal. I got plenty of more material. But so depending on what happens tomorrow, we might pick this up. Let me just give you social Darwinism. Alive today. So it's based on Charles Darwin's theory of natural evolution, natural selection, evolution. Social Darwinism is not that. It basically takes the theories of social Darwinism and applies them to a society that is changing. So Charles Darwin makes these observations and has this hypothesis at the time that later becomes scientific theory, and says that this world is ever changing. There's geological changes, there's climate changes, and because of that, the species on this planet have been in continuous flux. And it's an explanation rather than just looking at the Bible and God snapped his fingers and all of the animals and birds and snakes and human beings were just here. It's like, no, this is something that has happened over the course of billions of years because this world is ever changing, right? You could put this world together as a jigsaw. At one point, all of the continents were put together. Over billions of years, they've separated. That's had an effect on species. What social Darwinists like Herbert Spencer, the top philosopher of social Darwinism, saying, oh, the Industrial Revolution, society's changing. Human beings need to adapt. And if they don't adapt, they deserve the poverty that they are going to perish in. That is the natural order of things. So it's pathologizing poverty. There's something wrong with you. Which there can be a case made for that, right? People do make irresponsible decisions. They put themselves in a bad economic situation. But if 90% of people in this country back then, and perhaps even today, can't afford to pay their bills and are going further and further and further into debt, can that be explained away by individual irresponsibility when it comes to their economic situation entirely? So it's a way of discounting somebody like Mother Jones going, no, man, it's a system. It's a system problem. So let's leave it at that. Again, please go to Pronto if you want to earn some more EDCMs. You can earn quite a bit, actually, if you take a look at what's there, 50 per chapter. So tomorrow can be a big money maker. We will continue. So we'll go into Mother Jones, her autobiography, and Soul of the Indian, which is such an interesting text that talks about the spiritual beliefs of Indian religion, as he puts it. As well as how they organize their families. So Sophia brought up how we don't value mothers and women. What we find in Dakota culture, East Dakota, is the whole point of our tribe, of our people. The whole point of it. The whole point of it is to honor women, to protect them, to provide, and to honor their agency as contributing members of this tribe. It's not patriarchal. It's not like, hey, I'll protect you, I'll provide for you. They're doing that too. And they have the added contribution of providing children. God's gift to our tribe to keep us connected and ongoing. So what you read in chapter 2 is a completely different mindset of how women aren't necessarily honored, but are recognized as human beings who are contributing to the survival of our tribe. And it's amazing how women had births back then. Really amazing. Amazing. And if you haven't read it yet, it will blow your mind how women had babies back then within the Dakota tribes. So let's leave it at that, guys. Get you out 5 minutes early since I'm such a nice guy. Please have some coffee or some tea on the way out if you so desire. Thank you, Sophia, for your contributions. They are incredibly valuable. So anytime you're able to show up, please show up.
Thank you.
This will be available if you want to review any of this in a dedicated folder, along with the opportunity to write a reaction paper to it. And then in the worksheet, since you were here, you could write in what it was. I've changed it a bit. Since there's a possibility that you could have already done the assignment associated with this talk that we have today. Pick whatever assignment you want to complete for in that sign-up sheet, and then I'll take a look at it and put a complete in whatever assignment that is. That's for being present. And then the other benefits are, if you write reaction papers, there's other benefits that you can get.
Okay, so just to clarify, I do get a benefit. I mean, if I get the benefit of the discussion and a deeper level of understanding of the material, but also when I show up, I do get a benefit for just showing up, and then a second benefit for writing the paper. Okay.
So for being present and contributing, write down in that sign-up sheet which assignment you want to complete to. So let's say B2.1, a particular audiobook.
Okay.
Whatever it is, just write that down in there. And then when I get a chance today or tomorrow in the grade book, I will mark that as complete.
Okay, great. I'll pass that along to Ksenia too, because I think that we both didn't really understand how it worked. And if I'm ever talking too much, you can just ask me to stay on mute.
Yeah. Contribute as much as you need. I know other students are going to benefit. You're contributing to the overall point of this discussion, which is to understand our shared humanity, because it's needed more than ever.
I agree. Yes. And I just on a personal note, I was so sorry to hear about the loss of Holy Family. I know that there must be some a lot of ambivalence around the closure of it, but I know that just Brandy and all the women who work there have provided generations of women much needed care, and it was very sad to hear that.
Yeah, it was much more than just being laid off. Every person, every woman working there, they weren't working there because they were just collecting a paycheck. They were dedicated to the mission. And so it was a double fold heartbreak. And so hopefully they're trying to get things up and running again. So hopefully they're not shutting down, but we'll see. We'll pray for better days for them. That's for sure.
Yes, truly. And yeah, I'm excited to get into this next reading. I could have gone on, and I was going to say earlier, like that patriarchy is really, was brought in with colonialism, and it is